This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Aerial XL, built to make sure your rig is seen when it matters most. On scene, visibility saves time and prevents confusion. Aerial XL's illuminated number boards cut through the dark, the smoke, and the chaos, so command and incoming units know exactly where you are. From a truck stage down the block to an engine at the hydrant, your company's identity is clear and unmistakable. Installation is simple, the build is rugged, and every board is engineered for maximum visibility and durability. Aerial XL helps your department stand out, be seen, and stay safe. Check them out at aerialxl.com. That's AIRELXL.com, or call 855-700-0125. Aerial XL, because being seen makes all the difference.
Hey everybody, good morning. It's Rob with Frontline Mindset. I am very excited today. I have a special guest coming on the podcast who's pretty up and high up in the food chain, so to speak, with New York State. I have Deputy State Fire Administrator Luci Labriola-Cuffe with us today. Luci, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So Luci, you had quite a bit of a journey in the fire service. You didn't just apply for this job one day and come out and say, like, hey, you know what, I think I'd like this. Like, you have a long, tenuous career in the fire service. Kind of share your journey in the fire service and, like, what inspired you to join and, you know, some of the influences that were early on in your career to help start to build the base of who you are in the fire service.
So I'll start as I was a child. About 7, 8 years old, my mom woke us up in the middle of the night. The house was charged with smoke. The dog had woken her up, and we basically had a fire in the house. And thank God the dog woke her up. I have 2 older sisters. So all of us got out of the house, and the fire department came, put the fire out. And that was really my first experience in seeing a fire department, act and do their thing. Then years later, my dad started getting ill. The ambulance came and took care of him. And then there was one time he was operating a piece of machinery at our house. We kind of lived up a mountain. And as I was home alone with him, I was 17 years old. And as he was operating the machine near a cliff, the machine went over the cliff, trapping him underneath the machine. I ran down the cliff just to see if he was alive. He was, thankfully. It's just his leg was trapped underneath. And he told me, go up and get a crowbar. You can get me out of here, which I tried to do. And I wasn't lifting a machine by myself. Called the fire department. They came up, winched the machine and got him out. So I think both of those times really were reflective on, wow, I thought this was really interesting work. And, I lifeguarded in the summer through high school and college. When I went to college, I was pre-med initially. But as my dad got ill and got sicker and I had to be home a little bit more with him, I just couldn't handle the pace of being pre-med. But I did still do some medicine where I had a degree in exercise physiology, where I was working towards going into a cardiac rehab program. With that, during college, I knew some folks in the firehouse that I went to high school with, and they said, you should join. And our fire department in the town where I grew up ran ambulances as well as the fire apparatus. So I decided when I graduated college, I joined just to be an EMT. I did not want to go into a burning building. I told my mom that at that point. My dad had already passed away. My mom's like, you're crazy. And I said, well, of course I'm not going to go into a burning building. Took my EMT class, started doing that, and then went to my first structure fire to do rehab. And I said, nope, I'm going to do that. That looks awesome. And got into the first, fire essentials class, which is what it was back then. And got right into it. And, as I'm sure you're aware, once you get involved and get into the community, you just get a passion for it.
I think it's pretty cool that you did the fire. I did fire essentials as well, and I always talk about it with great like a positive memory, because I still think to this day it was one of the, and I know times have changed and our education modalities have changed, but it was such a uh, essential firefighting and initial fire attack 1 and 2 were such great courses, and sometimes I long for those. So that's great that you and I share that together, and that you had that experience, getting that hook at that fire scene. When it comes to those early days, who are some of the influences that you had in your career?
There are a couple of chiefs and ex-chiefs in my fire department. So one comes to mind is Mitch Syme. He has now since passed during the COVID period, but he was a staple in our firehouse. He would get firefighter of the year every year. He'd go to 90% of the calls. He worked a job where he was a handyman around a house, so he could leave whenever a call came in. Um, he was an ex-chief. He was the secretary for the fire commissioners, and he just knew everybody in town. You'd show up on a call and he'd be like, I remember when so and so lived here, and then before that so and so lived here, and just knew the community so well. He knew my family because I grew up in that community. So he was very welcoming. Um, at the time, there was one other female firefighter in my department, but she wasn't very active. So as the only real active female firefighter, it was a kind of, this is 30 years ago. So it was a different time. And, so some of the men gave me a hard time, but there's some that just wrapped their arm around me. Another one was a dear friend of mine. His name is Mike Giacchio. He was an officer at the time, and he used to just, try to toughen me up and tell me, hey, you know what? You're a new member. Now you can go out in the middle of the night, so I don't have to. But he, I worked under him as I became an officer. He was chief during the September 11th attacks, and he was a really good leader at that time, and really brought the department through those rough times. So he's another one, and then another dear friend of mine, Rob Lombardi, another officer and friend that I looked up to and helped guide us, and we worked together to just always build improvements into the department.
If you don't mind me asking, what department was it that you started out in?
The Armonk Fire Department.
Okay,
It's in Westchester County.
yeah. So that's, I mean, that sounds great because it's had, like, what I'm hearing is like the mentorship was there. From you had good mentors to get you moving up into the ranks and encouraging you, especially 30 years ago, kind of trail. I don't want to use the term trailblazer, but like you proved through a path of being that one of the first females in the fire service that was active, and kind of, I don't want to say adversity, but like trudging through it, getting through those times. I mean, that's my mom did the same thing. She was one of the first members in the Youngsville Volunteer Fire Department that was a female, and generally was a positive experience for her. So it certainly helped shape my fire service career of things. You became chief of the department as well, right?
Yeah, so I became chief of department in April of 2011. Um, I did have people run against me pretty much every position that I went up through the ranks because I was a woman. And people didn't think that I should be chief, but I just, I felt like I had to, if I worked twice as hard and just as much, that I would get the job, which I did. And I was, I got elected in with a pretty good large margin, which I was very happy to see. Um, I felt like I took a lot of training because not only I obviously at that time was working, in training for Westchester County, but not only because of that, but because I wanted all the tools in the toolbox to do the job. I understood the responsibility, which I don't think everybody does when they in the volunteer side when they take chiefs positions, but I had a really good understanding of the responsibility, and I wanted to make sure that um, I was most effective at my job. So I took as much training as I could so that I could be effective as a boss and as a leader.
If there's one thing that you can, because I mean, I think what you just said is indicative of most people coming into, and it doesn't even matter if it's on the volunteer side. I know it was me as a career firefighter and becoming deputy chief over a little over a year ago. Like, there was so much that I didn't know, because you don't know what you don't know, right? Like, what advice would you have for somebody coming into the position of a chief officer that, like, from your experiences, would be something they should do?
I would definitely encourage them to, read leadership books and a variety of them. Management styles vary from place to place, but the calls, running the calls is the easiest part of the job. Once you're in the emergency services, it's instinctual. It's almost like automatic. It's the personnel issues that become the hardship, and volunteer fire service, it's like a family, and not every family gets along, and I always said, like, a good, working fire, not that you wanted to see someone lose a house, but that always brought the family together. People like to work together, it brought everybody's tools to work together, and that made things better in the firehouse for a while. But, you know, I just encourage people to be open to criticism, to be open to look at themselves and say, what can I do better? And don't think you have all the answers.
When growing up and working in Westchester County, what unique challenges and experience shaped your perspective as a firefighter and a fire service leader?
So I started working for Westchester County in 2006. I started as an EMS coordinator part-time, and then I started working there full-time in 2007. I really embraced all of the instructors I worked with, because there was such a variety and experience. Some from volunteer fire instructor. They weren't volunteer instructors, but they're volunteer firefighters as instructors, to career instructors that were various levels on the job. Through Rescue 3 and FDNY and Squad 41 to deputy chiefs in some of the city departments in Westchester County. And chief of department. So I wanted exposure to them. I wanted to learn from them, grow from them, and understand. So just through osmosis of sitting at the kitchen table and having those conversations, this I can't. I learned so much just through that, and it's hard to explain if you're not in this business, but just having day-to-day conversations and hearing stories and hearing tactics just really made me a better fire chief.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that was there anybody in particular that you remember from that time frame that was like really influential in that area? I mean, you had some pretty heavy hitters sitting at the table. I know some of the instructors that are involved in Westchester County. Is there anybody that sticks out in your mind?
Yeah, there are definitely a few. I would say first and foremost, Tom Duffy. He's a deputy chief, retired deputy chief of the city of Mount Vernon. He ran a lot of the career academies down there, and was somebody I really looked up to, and I thought was a tremendous leader in his own way. We had Lieutenant Dave Russell. He was with FDNY, retired. He also worked at the academy a lot, so I had a lot of exposure to him. Lot of experience with New York City. God, so many. Jimmy Smith, he's with Squad 41 at New York City, retired. Stayed as a firefighter his entire career, but just was into the job all the time and always tried to do the right thing. So there's some of those. Jim Seymour, who's now chief of the Peekskill Fire Department, but watched his career grow. He was just a firefighter when I started working there, and watched him get promoted, and he got promoted through the Scarsdale Fire Department to chief of department, and then became the first career chief in Peekskill. So some of those folks really were monumental in helping me mold and become the leader in Westchester that I was.
And I think it's important too, because like one of the factors here is that you had the insight to sit at the table, as you put it, and listen and pick their brains, and because I think that's one thing people don't do very often, is sit there and have that conversation, or just sit and listen to what these people have to say. And I get to shout out to Chief Duffy, because he was Captain Duffy in my fire academy, and certainly helped shape some good habits for me as a firefighter. So if he's listening, thank you for everything you've done for the fire service. I appreciate that. During your time with Armonk, including your role as chief, what lessons did you learn that kind of carried over into statewide leadership?
So my biggest thing with leadership is holding yourself and your people accountable. That is probably my biggest leadership takeaway. And if you don't hold people accountable, and you don't hold yourself accountable, it's just, things go haywire. So I admit when I'm wrong. I made a mistake as chief at a call where I put one of my folks in somewhat of a harm's way. And I sat all my officers down, the following day. I said, this is the mistake that I made. Don't make the same mistake I did. And I was open to that. And I realized that I did that. So I think when you show yourself being accountable and being humble and have humility, that goes a long way. But then you need to be stern. You need to not be afraid to have the difficult conversations with your folks. It's a lot easier in government than it is in volunteership. When sometimes when you have to hold your people accountable, they're also your top responders. That now, if you have to discipline them, they're not there for you at 2 o'clock in the morning when you need them to be. But you have to be willing to do that in order to make a difference, because then you don't know who's not showing up because those people aren't being held accountable. So that's one of my biggest messages as a boss. But also being empathetic. I do a lot with the peer support realm and behavioral health and stuff like that, which I know we'll get to. But um, I just feel like showing empathy and showing people that you care is vitally important. Like when I was working a lot with the instructors in Westchester, I knew their kids' names. I would ask about their families. I would ask about how their vacations were. Like I just felt like that part of the job was really important.
Yeah, empathy is and being empathetic is one of those things that I remember in my first EMT class. Sue Bodenstein would like hammer empathy to all of us, and it really is one of those things that kind of throughout my career is like just such a big lesson. And then accountability, like wow, like that's, and especially in the volunteer fire service, you have to have it's such a difficult tightrope to walk, because you have to have that accountability, because you can't let what is it? There's a line that I'm trying to think of about like the normalization of deviance, right? Like you have to be on, and it's if you normalize it, then it's your top responders, especially when you're dealing with if there's an issue, you don't want them to be the example of the bad thing, and it goes back to that accountability. So that's huge. That's I took a couple of notes on that one and set up a marker for that, but. So, your work in Westchester County, how did it help prepare for you for the role of Deputy State Fire Administrator?
No, that. Like, I'm not.
So, OFPC in general, the Office of Fire Prevention and Control, works in partnership with counties throughout the state, for training programs. So that's one of the biggest things. So I worked with the office, my entire time in running training in Westchester. So I had a pretty good understanding of how OFPC ran with that. But so I had a lot of relationships built with the folks here at OFPC before, coming on board. But the access that I had to the people that I worked with, as we said before, I had a lot of pretty big names, come through and work with us, but also the access I had to the training programs. I was able to, be able to take as much training as possible because I, scheduled it, and I could sit in on stuff as much as possible. And I was able to, we had a pretty strong municipal training officers group, and we would do workshops and larger seminars, and we'd bring in outside speakers, and I was able to sit in on that and help with those. And so you take the good with the bad. I had some good leaders and some bad leaders, and you see what works and what doesn't work, and you kind of try to pick a little from each to make it your own.
When it comes to leadership philosophy, what leadership philosophy has guided you in the transition from like, this local fire chief to now like the statewide fire administration position? Like it's got to be, it's such a shift that I don't think I can't imagine you were like, hey, like this is where I'll be one day, because just like especially when you're just trying to grapple like being a fire chief, right? Like, what kind of speak on that a little bit?
So as I mentioned earlier, I went to college to work in the medical field, and I enjoyed working in cardiac rehab for as long as I did. I actually became the manager there, and like the next position to move up was, hospital administration, which is not really what I wanted to do. So I took a gamble and decided to work for, Westchester County Emergency Services, and kind of changed my career path, which was, I was volunteering at the time, so I knew I loved the fire service, but to go from something that, a completely different career. I actually took a little bit of a salary change where it was a loss of a salary initially, to do that, but I just felt like it was the right thing for me to do at the right time. And boy, was I, so happy that I did that after my first couple of years. But it wasn't until, I got a call from somebody that said, "Hey, would you be interested in this open position of the Deputy State Fire Administrator?" And if you know me, I'm typically, I talk a lot. I'm strong-minded. I'm not shy at all. But when that came out of the person's mouth, I sat down and I was like, "Wow, I'm speechless. Like never in a million years did I ever think that I could hold a position, of that value to have that much impact statewide." And I thought about it and talked it over with my husband a little bit of saying maybe I should apply. And the thought that I can help influence the fire service statewide was just amazing to me. And never in a million years, when I knocked on the door of the firehouse and got an application to join as an EMT, did I ever in a million years think I would be sitting in this seat now.
So since your appointment, how have you seen OFPC's training and education programs evolve to meet today's fire service challenges?
I appreciate it. It's great. This is cool stuff.
So I will say this, nothing moves fast in state government. So as much as I'm trying to change, I've been here just under 3 years, December will be 3 years. We're trying to make changes, but, we've updated. One of my biggest missions was the, firefighter assist and search team class, FAST class. That program we were still teaching the class that came out in the 90s. And it was not ever updated, even when the NFPA standard came out about RIT teams. So one of my first missions was that class is to save us. It's to save us as firefighters. So that was one of my first missions is let's get that class updated to the current NFPA standards. And so we were able to do that. And that the instructor authorizations are going out, been going out all year this year. So that class will be live now. Some other stuff, we're trying to put more classes online. So we have an e-learning platform through our learning management system. So we've put more classes online, and one of the things I'm moving towards is trying to even do that with a lot more of our classes to make them hybrid. I may have an instructor in one county that is really good at teaching standpipes. So why not have that person in the whole state benefit by doing a standpipe lecture for the engine company class and have that online versus have that, didactic in person in the county where students can do that. So I'm really looking at that. We built out an audiovisual person and studio at the academy so we can start doing that more and filming that stuff. So we have the capacity to do that. So that's a lot of stuff that's going on behind the scenes. So, one of the things out of the recruitment and retention task force that I sat on actually before I came on board with OFPC was that, training's killing the fire service. And, you hear that for years, but I don't really think that's the case. I think that people need to understand that, we need to make sure the firefighters are safe and effective. But there's just different ways that we can offer that training. And I'm trying to be more deliberate in doing that and giving them more understanding that their lives are busy. So how can we make the training more effective for them and fit into their schedules?
One of the things that I think I had asked James Cable this when he came to a class, it was an instructor 2 class that I took, but it's constant training, and I asked us, like, live fire training has become a beast of its own because of the safety measures, because of the certifications, and then you need so many people to do it correctly as far as and they've got to be certified for this. And one of the things that I was asking in the class was because I know between county instructors and state instructors, for the departments that are out there, because I took a class that had a lot of volunteers in a state time class, so they were dedicated, but even then there's only so much they'd be able to do. And I was like, man, I said, it would be nice if the state could coordinate this to help out with getting instructors. I know in Dutchess County it's something you can get the instructors to help you with the live fire training, because one department can't, even for us, my organization is working with other mutual aid departments so we can get enough instructors just to make sure that we're doing it correctly, because we don't want one of those training scars at all, right? That's for sure. But yeah, there's we've got to start thinking outside the box and how to, because I training is not really, it's not killing the fire service, but sometimes I think that we've been in how we've always done it mindset, and it's fantastic to know that there's an e-learning platform coming out and that we're doing hybrid classes and stuff, because this is going to deliver us a better product in the end versus, like just in Dutchess County alone, like if you're in the eastern end of the county and the class is at the fire training center, that's a 45-minute drive to an hour drive just to get to the place to have the class at. And that's a lot that we're
Right.
asking people. And like, it's coming up with the creative ways to overcome those hurdles. I think that's amazing. Like that's fantastic.
Yeah, and another thing I'm looking at is VR training, like virtual reality training. I've contacted a couple of companies that are getting their feet under them for doing some of these classes, and there's nothing that will replace actually doing live fire training. And new firefighters are going to need to be in that position. But you look at the career fire service and the 101 hours of in-service training that you guys have to do. Do you actually have to go and do an actual burn, or can we do it VR? So we're reducing cancer risks. So I'm actually exploring those options as well. I am very progressive. I like to see what's out there. And if there's tools that we can obtain to do that, I'm open to the idea. So I'm looking and exploring those options as well.
I know that technology and changing risk are always evolving. One of those comes up is lithium-ion batteries, like alternative fuels and like climate-related emergencies. How is OFVC adapting training to address those new hazards?
So we do have a class that's on the e-learning platform now about lithium-ion batteries. They talk about the battery energy storage systems. We're put on the governor's working group after the three BESS fires a couple of summers ago. So we've been working with NYSERDA and some other, DEC and Department of Health and other organizations about, exploring that stuff. Um, you know, Things pop up like the Chromebook challenge thing, where all of a sudden, schools were dealing with this stuff, and we saw
Yeah.
a lot of issues come out. So we try to do a lot of social media campaigns to educate the public. I think New York City's done a good job with that, where in 2023 they had 17 or 19 fatalities, where that's really reduced because of their campaigning and their codes. So that working group put together a bunch of code changes that did get adopted for 2026. For some of this stuff. So we're involved with that kind of behind the scenes. As far as building out more training programs, we're looking at, to see what else we're doing. So I know like our hazmat branch is rewriting or updating the hazmat modules 1 through 5 currently, and some of that's going to go into that training program. A little bit more information about how to deal with lithium-ion batteries. It's a hazard, but we do have some staff that are focused on emerging technologies. So that we can try to get ahead of it as best we can.
And I think too, like I just want to kind of like this is a challenge that you guys are aggressively taking on. But you talked about the fast class, right? And that that the class hadn't really been touched since the '90s, and the NFL. Like, so when like we're talking about like this is not. I'm trying to think of how to write the right way to say it. It's not as easy as just simply saying, "Hey, we're going to do this," because we're dealing with emerging threats as we're also dealing with updating our like I call them like legacy programs. Maybe I don't know if that's a right way to say it, but like so that it's really like you're juggling a lot as you're doing this. You have emerging threats on one hand, and then you're making sure that we're still staying up to date with FAST, Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2, pump ops. Like I mean, vehicle extrication, right? Like I feel like sometimes what's old is new and what's new is old. So there's all these other things that are working together, and there's multiple branches of OFBC that are involved in this.
Yes. So, yeah, I mean, we have 7 branches across the office. So, they each have their own entity, but they intertwine. And, so we have, staff that are each like program managers of different courses. So they own we call them owning the course, and they have backups to that. And so their job is to put a team together to help, do updates or rewrite the class, or maybe go to commercial curriculum if that, if that works. And then, we have a group called the Consistency Group that meets every 2 weeks, and new curriculum or updated curriculum comes across that group, and we review it and determine if other changes need to be made, or how it needs to go and move forward. So a lot of moving parts, a lot of updates. I think we have close to 40 programs that are either in revision or update right now.
Wow.
But we have staff that are so dedicated. They're passionate about what they do. But then in the middle of doing an update, we'll have a response where we're actually have team members at a technical rescue response in Rensselaer County right now. So in the middle of us doing our day-to-day work, we'll have a storm come through or a hurricane or, a collapse or something. And now we have to stop everything and go be an emergency responder. So it takes a toll on them sometimes, but they are very passionate folks.
And I know this wasn't on the list here, but like, can you kind of talk about some of the special operations stuff because I'll use FDNY as the example here. Like, people think of New York, they think of FDNY, they think of like SOC and the rescue teams, Hazmat One, etc. But New York City is only New York City. New York State actually helps coordinate and lead teams. Like, we have a collapse team. We have. Like, can you kind of just speak on some of the? I mean, even like the fire investigation stuff. Like, that's like, people don't sometimes realize. I don't want to say how far-reaching the state's power is, but like, really, like, like, what resources does OFPC have that's out there that people might not be aware of?
Sure. Well, I'll just talk about each branch specifically, if that works. So, fire training and education is probably the branch that most people are familiar with, because that's
Right.
the most SFIs, and that teaches firefighter one, firefighter two, fire officer one, so on and so forth. But we have fire investigations. So our fire investigators generally get called out 250 or more times a year. Most of the cases they get called out to are either the high end or fatal fires, or to the areas where they don't have a robust local team. We do have ignitable liquid detection canines as part of that program. And those investigators testify in courtroom cases quite a bit. They're pretty high profile cases around the state. So, we had 17 investigators. We just added on 6 new investigators and another deputy chief to that. But, it takes a couple of years to get up to speed with getting the training, getting the experience behind doing investigations before they'll be ready to be lead investigators.
And they have peace officer status as well, so
yes,
they're like the power. Again, I mean, I know just from some of my own experiences, like how crucial that part of the equation is in doing investigations sometimes, and where it's such a benefit to have somebody with that status behind them for the case, so to speak.
Yeah, so they have peace officer and carry firearms. So that's our only unit that carries firearms. But yeah, so they do have that arresting power, so to speak. They typically work with local law enforcement, to do that. But that's for their protection as well.
Yeah.
So then we have the fire and life safety branch. Those are our fire inspectors. They inspect some state properties, colleges and universities, with outside of New York City, and OPWDD homes, group homes, things like that. They do a tremendous job in keeping, colleges safe. They train RAs and other college staffs on fire safety. Like right now, they're doing a lot of that training right before the school year starts, to make sure that it's safe in schools. It reduces the alarms in the schools as well, for the local responders. And they just go out and do a lot of public, safety events. They also do permitting for sparkling devices. They do, state property as far as concerts and events and things such as that. So they are out there really doing a lot of work every day. They are also peace officers, but they do not carry firearms. Then we have hazmat and tech rescue. So hazmat, there are all hazmat technicians. They train, the fire service in hazmat, but then they also have a response capability to go out and respond to assist with a hazmat call if needed. So they can be called at any time of the day, and we'll send people out. And then tech rescue, tech rescue is a lot of different functions in tech rescue between swift water, collapse, trench rescue, rope rescue. But we have people that are trained in all of those facets of technical rescue. They go out and train, locals at that level. And then we have the SWIFT Center up in Oriskany, which is the SWIFT training facility, which is an amazing facility. I mean, people come from all over the world to look at that facility. People just recently came from Germany, Australia, from all over the United States to look at that facility. It's a very unique facility to train on swift water in a controlled environment. So, if somebody is having trouble swimming or whatever, you can hit a stop button and stops the rapids so that we can, make a safe, effective rescue of a student if needed, where that's not like that if they're out on an actual, rapids in a river. So it just makes it, then we can change the scenarios in there, which is great. To have a street, high flooding waters in a street, which is what we see a lot of during flash flooding and stuff. So it's really effective training there. So, and then the tech rescue team also has live victim search canines. So they go out as well. And then several of the staff also have drones that can go out to look for search for victims or for other reasons. And then our other branch, we have operational support branch. That branch does the national standard exams, and then they just basically do logistics for the entire office. The quartermaster, our vehicles, all that stuff behind it. And then that's also all the people that schedule all the courses, pay the SFIs, and do all that woeful work that no one seems to know they exist until they don't get a paycheck, right? So that's the important stuff. And then the last branch is safety. We added a safety branch a couple of years ago. It's not a robust branch, but it's probably one of the most important branches we have, is we want to make sure what we do is effective and safe.
Have you ever wanted to see the inside of a fire apparatus manufacturing facility? Well, now's your chance. On Tuesday, September 23rd, HME Aaron's Fox and the Dingus Fire Company are teaming up for a joint open house in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Join us for an all-access pass to the HME factory, where you'll walk the floor and see firsthand how fire apparatus are built. From the raw materials to final assembly, you'll witness the craftsmanship, the attention to detail, and most importantly, the people who pour their pride and skill into every truck that leaves the line. You'll also experience a live demonstration of the SAM water control system and get hands-on time with their latest rigs during their drive and ride event. From there, we'll visit the Grand Rapids Fire Department's brand new station, check out their brand new HME Aaron's Fox Core 62 engine. So do me a favor, mark your calendars. Come join me on September 23rd in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Come see the process, meet the builders, experience the future of fire apparatus with HME Aaron's Fox and the Dingus Fire Company.
Yeah, and thank you for going over all that, because like I said, these are resources that we have, and like even I know in my career there was times where we didn't realize we could tap into those resources until it was too late, and it's one of those things where the coordination that goes into that on the state level as well, like that, because it's like, especially something with the tech rescue teams, just correct me if I'm wrong, like it's not just OFPC personnel, it's like people can join the team from other departments with disciplines to kind of come together and form a tech rescue team if it's necessary.
So we have Task Force 2 that's based out of the Capital Region, and you could join as a volunteer of Task Force 2,
Right.
from another agency if you have the training, and then we will deploy that out. Like Task Force 2 right now is out. A dump truck went into a house in Rensselaer, and they went out to assist with that, with the technical rescue portion of shoring up the house. So, so we do have that through Task Force 2, and it's and New York City is Task Force 1. We do have a good relationship with New York City and FDNY, but we have our own task force as well, throughout the state that will respond statewide as necessary. And sometimes we pre-deploy it, like we know, like when Hurricane Erin was coming up the coast, if it was more coastal, and closer to Long Island and Westchester, and that part, we would have pre-deployed SWIFT teams, further south of Albany, knowing that was coming in. So if a planned event, it's easy to pre-deploy. If it's an unplanned event, it'll take us a little time to get there, but we'll get there.
Right. We touched on this before, but you recently addressed a social media challenge involving tampering with the laptop components. How do you guys make the decision with emerging risks that require public awareness campaigns, and what strategies help reach parents, youth, and educators when it comes to this stuff?
I mean, it's basically, what's trending, right, on social media.
Right.
Like we're part of the larger Division of Homeland Security Emergency Services. So we have a public information officer, a team that tracks stuff, and they certainly flag stuff for us when they see things pop up, or, even our fire protection specialists. I mean, they're all out there, we have offices all over the state, so they'll flag stuff if they see something popular. we started seeing for the Chromebook, we just started seeing it pop up all over social media, and we were asking fire departments to track it for us and letting us know when it was happening. And quite honestly, the schools weren't even calling the fire departments to a lot of these events. And so we have folks that sit on a school safety committee. So we ended up doing direct messaging from the school to the schools on how to handle those properly. So we do have a good working relationship with other state agencies. So, just through our partnerships through other state agencies, like, we have staff sitting on different committees for a lot of various different things. And that's how we communicate.
Moving to behavioral health, I know it's a pressing issue in the fire service. And during the 2024 safety stand down, what were the key themes that you emphasized about firefighter mental health and resilience?
So this is something that's extremely important to me. So I appreciate you bringing it up. I've been part of peer support programs for about 15 years, and mental health in general in the first response community is struggling. The Division of Homeland Security Emergency Services, in partnership with SUNY New Paltz and the Benjamin Center, last year did a mental health needs assessment for first responders, and it was the first of its kind. And we were fortunate to get more than 6,000 first responders to take the time, which was about 20 to 25 minutes, to actually go through the survey and talk about their mental health, which was phenomenal. The results, not surprising at all. People are struggling. People have hypervigilance. They're depressed. They feel burnt out. They feel like their employers will look down upon them if they go and ask for treatment. They feel there's a stigma. So none of that surprised us after the survey, but it gave us raw data that now we can reference, to get help that they need. So I think the biggest issue is that people are afraid to seek help because it's going to seem like they're weak. And I tell people all the time when I talk about this, when you ask for help, that's a sign of strength. Right. It's a sign of saying, I need help and I want to get better. And when I know that someone's seeking therapy, that's who I want to partner with. That's who I want on the back of my engine. That's who I want to be with, not somebody who's struggling and not dealing with it. So I think getting rid of even the word stigma and just getting it out of her and not even thinking about it and just making it normalized to talk about our feelings is extremely important. And, we've been doing that. I actually started, with the help of a lot of people in the office. So I don't want to say it was a we. We started a peer support program throughout the Division of Homeland Security because our folks are going out. Our teams are getting deployed. Our Office of Recovery goes out and helps with recovery efforts after storms. Our emergency management teams go out and help out. So the larger division, our folks were suffering from our deployments, and we felt like starting a peer support team would help our folks. So I'm the team coordinator for the larger division, but I think it's just vital that we help our folks. So just having someone to talk to is important, even if it's just a peer, because sometimes that's all we need is just a vent. But one of the things that does lack in New York State is culturally competent therapists and mental health clinicians. Our world is different. We may not be able to keep to a Monday at 4 o'clock schedule every week because of forced overtime or changing of schedules. So we've been working with the Office of Mental Health to build a culturally competent training course for clinicians to explain our world, to explain, hey, this is how you would have to treat us that would work better with us versus the normal, person. So that's going to go live sometime this fall. It's almost complete. And we're really excited. So it's going to go out to all clinicians in the state, and they can take it and get their continuing education, credit for taking it. And then they can decide for themselves, is this a population I want to work with or not? But we're trying to make a difference to allow to have more mental health clinicians available for first responders. Because right now, if someone's in crisis, you call somebody that is mentally competent or culturally competent to work with them, it's a 6 to 8 week wait to get your first appointment. So that's part of the problem as well. And so we've been working very strongly, and I'm really happy to say that we're trying to make a difference there as well, because it's important. And, suicide rates are up. The survey that we did, the normal New York population thinks of suicide or has suicide ideation is 4%. In that study, it was 16%, which is four times the population, the normal population. So that was significant. And we really need to reduce that number.
Luci, do you also think that, on top of the stuff that we deal with call-wise and the traumas that we see, like it's also, I've noticed a shift too of like understanding that it's not necessarily the job. Like it could be the cherry on the top of the ice cream, so to speak. But like there's also like us having to accept and I mean accept in a positive way, uh, what's going on in our personal lives, of understanding like whether it's a new mother who's dealing with something, or if it's a member going through a divorce and the wife's just being really nasty about it versus just issues with the kids. Like all of these things can kind of coincide because like I sometimes think that we get focused on the calls and the trauma that we see, but we like it can also be the stuff at home that we're bringing into the job. I remember my retired senior man used to ask everybody if they were here today, because he had that intuition. He would pick up on it. Do you have any thoughts on that? Because I know like that's something where like we're almost like like we I don't want to say we do a good job because we can always improve, but like we see trauma, we know sometimes, but then like it's asking for help, like finances, right? Like how many firefighters over the years that I've helped out and my friend has helped out with debt because they just didn't understand finances and how much stress that brought to them, and it like really was just it was crippling to the point where they were in the depths of despair and didn't realize that they could get they just needed some simple help, and then but like also like they had to treat the depression that they got themselves into with the cycle, right? So like do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Oh yeah, it's all of it, right? It's all included. It's the whole environment. So, you work a crazy schedule, or you get held on overtime or anything else. Does that affect home life? Absolutely. Does your spouse understand it? If they're not in the business, do they understand it? Do they resent you for missing birthdays and
Oh
holidays?
boy,
Of
yeah.
course they do. So then, but then if you don't work that overtime, you do have those financial struggles. I mean, all those strings are pulling at you. So it all comes together and it all affects you one way or the other. And that you, as a person, that weighs on you. Like, if I don't work this, I can't pay for this. But if I do work this, my kids are going to suffer because I don't go to their softball game, or I don't go to their soccer game, and I don't go to their recital. So the struggle is absolutely real. And sometimes it's like, well, it's also, you love your job, right? Like, firefighters say all the time, someday I'm going to have to wake up and go to work, right? Because we're so passionate about what we do that we love to be at work too. So it's just, it's, you get pulled in multiple directions. So it's finding ways to communicate with your loved ones about those struggles, I think, is one of the most important things. And obviously communication is always a gap. If you think you're communicating enough, you're not communicating enough, and that's something that's a quote from my Commissioner Bray. But so it's something that I think absolutely financial problems, health, not eating correctly, which how many firehouses actually like make salad and vegetables and all that stuff for their meals. My firehouse, we used to just get pizzas on Monday nights. It was just easy. And then getting the exercise, do you guys, do that? Does the fire department go out and say, okay, let's do a walk around the firehouse tonight. Let's do this. So it's all of it. It's totally a whole wellness program altogether. So that's why I think peer support teams, not just critical incident stress management and stress debriefings and the old CISM stuff, not just doing that after a traumatic call, but doing a whole global wellness program, I think is more important.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff out there right now. I mean, Crackle magazine is a phenomenal magazine. If you don't know that it exists, it's a big holistic wellness magazine for the fire service, that talks about financial struggles, health struggles, environment in general. So there's a lot more resources at our fingertips today than ever before. But we need to, as leaders, the leadership needs to have buy-in in order for the fire service to come in. If the leaderships don't want it there, it just will affect everybody. And then that goes into moral injury. So moral injury is kind of a newer terminology.
Yes.
But of seeing your leadership treat people like crap or not buy into their self-care, and then you not saying anything or and having to live with that or do anything like that, that's hurtful, and that also brings you down. It's just, so I try to inspire people to do well. I try to tell people it's okay to not be your best every day. And it's okay to not be okay. And my husband makes fun of me when I say that because I say it often. But but I truly mean it. Like, it's okay if you're not okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to say I'm not having a good day today,
I,
and just leave it at that.
One of the things that I do on the side, I mean, I don't really do it as much anymore because of time commitments, but I was a firearms instructor for the longest time, and I had a whole section of my class where I talked about suicide, and I talked about my experiences with suicide as a suicide survivor, because I wanted people to understand that, one, there is another side to this, because I would often, it didn't make any sense, but this the brain doesn't make sense in times of stress. I don't want to say anything because I don't want to lose my gun rights. Well, I don't want you to be dead either. So, like, but like, it was this whole like thing of like having that conversation about like, this is what I went through. This is the breaking point. This was my moment of clarity, and this is what helped look like. And these are resources that we can get to you. That, like myself, I'll any one of my students, I've always given them my phone number. Like, you have an issue, like, call me, and we'll get it taken care of. But like, you have to have that vulnerability and saying, it's okay to be not okay, because like, we think that we have to be okay. And like, I think when it comes to asking for help, there's like the asking for help for you said, you want that person on your back step because it shows that they have the strength to ask for the help. And it doesn't have to just be with, like you said, the peer support CISM type stuff. It could be with, hey, I need help with my finances. Can somebody help me out? Like, I always think the one thing I loved about the fire service is we have a deep bench of people who are experts in everything. Like, you talked about your mentor in the beginning and how he was a handyman and he worked at home. He was able to make money, but he knew all the people in town. He knew these things, right? Like, there's always those things that are there in our bench, and we can get somebody. We know somebody. We always got a guy. So for that stuff, like, we have we may not have all the resources, but we definitely know the people to call to get the resources if we don't know. So it's always, I guess, it's just one of those things where sorry, it's kind of a rant there, but it's
No, I agree, and it's just important that we recognize that having a bad day is not going to break us.
Mm-hmm.
And but the first responder community, we love to help people and rescue people. That's what we do.
Sorry
But
about that.
that's okay. But at the same time, we don't know how to rescue ourselves, or we don't want to rescue ourselves. Sometimes we just don't feel like we don't take care of ourselves the way we should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. What resources or initiatives are OFPC and the state putting in place to support firefighter behavioral health on both the volunteer and the career side?
So, as I mentioned, we did that first responder mental health assessment. So that is leading us down a path of trying to develop more culturally competent mental health therapists, and clinicians throughout the state. So we're working on that, like I mentioned. One of the things that the IFSTA book for the Essentials of Firefighter is at the 8th edition. So we're going to be doing an update to the Firefighter 1 program, for sometime towards the end of next year. So towards the end of 2026, early 2027. I plan on adding a unit, like we have a unit for cancer and decon. I'm going to add a unit about mental health and wellness, overall wellness, to the Firefighter 1 program moving forward. I think it's long overdue and necessary. So that's the plan there, to add it to our training programs. We now have had two in a row. So this March in 2026 will be our third annual health, safety, and wellness symposium. So we offer that in the state, and we've brought in some pretty big names and people like researchers in the field of the fire service talk about cancer, sleep, mental health, wellness. So we've done that. So we're doing as much as we can to educate the fire service.
Yeah. I know on the volunteer side, there's always struggles. One of the things that's helped out to like, I don't want to say combat this, but like a resource that's coming out is the new New York State stipend program for volunteer firefighters. Can you explain its goals and how you hope it will help with recruitment and retention across the state?
So, like I said, the Recruitment and Retention Task Force that New York State had put together, I was a member of that initially. And this was one of the things that they talked about, is maybe, making something a little bit lucrative to it's not to give them payment, but it's the wear and tear in their car going to and from class, the time spent away from family, the time spent potentially away from work, to give them a little something to say thank you. So the stipend program was developed, through the Recruitment and Retention Task Force, and it was really Commissioner Bray's really going out after she got here with the division and talking to the fire service and saying, what do you think will work? So we know recruitment and retention is an issue. Two areas that I think are the biggest issues is, one, getting the new recruits, but two, really retaining, I think, is a larger issue, is retaining this fire service. So where the task force thought, and myself, my personal feelings are that there are leadership gaps, and that's why people leave the fire service, is that there's bad leaders. Those leaders don't hold people accountable, so people just leave. They just get fed up. This is their free time that they're spending at the firehouse, and if they're not being handled effectively, they just walk away. Like, one of my biggest pet peeves in the fire service was, like, if I show up to drill night and there's no drill plan and they're planning it last minute, well, now you're wasting my time. Like,
Right.
I came here to learn, and I couldn't get something. So so why we picked these courses, the initial courses for the stipend program, was basically the basic exterior firefighting class, because some departments allow members to become just an exterior firefighter. We wanted the interior firefighters, because that's crucial to be able to be a fire service. And then we picked Fire Officer 1 because we wanted it lucrative for these fire service leaders to get some leadership training. So those were the initial three classes. We did the stipend program. I mean, we're giving out quite a large amount of money. The BFO class, the exterior class, they get $750 at course completion. The IFO class, or the interior firefighter class, gets $1,250. So if they complete the full Firefighter 1 series, they're getting $2,000. And then the Fire Officer 1 series are getting $1,000. And then recently we added the basic wildland fire suppression course, just because we've had more wildland fires in the state than ever before. So we wanted to, make that class also. And so that class is only an 8-hour class. So that class is getting $250 for course completion. So I have numbers in front of me. To date, we've had requests for stipends. Not all of them have been paid out yet, but requests for stipends for more than $4.8 million.
Wow.
And that's more than 3,000 students requesting those. So we're seeing people, take the training. And I can say in 2023, we had roughly 250 Fire Officer 1 classes. In 2024, we had 325. And to date, in 2025, we're just at August, or the beginning of September, and we already had 325 Fire Officer 1 courses. So the demand has definitely been raised. So we're happy that the fire service leadership is taking the training that it needed.
Yeah, and Fire Officer 1 is such because I talk about this class, especially with younger guys in my own department, and they're like, yeah, but promotions, the test is this far off or whatever. And it's like, I always say, like, hey, it's not about promotion. It's about decision making. It's about all these things that encompass being a fire officer. But you don't have to be the officer, because you could be first arriving. You could be dealing with these issues. You could be stepping up one day and having to be, in charge of a shift. So, like, I'm always encouraging people to get this class, because I think Fire Officer 1 is such a good introductory class, and it opens up the mind. Like, I think back to, the 101st Airborne parachuting into France and knowing everybody else's job, knowing the job above and knowing the job below, so that way you could, God forbid something happened to that person, you would be effective in it. And it's one of those things that makes our bench more deep in the skills department. So I think that's fantastic that the state's done this, and that they're getting that. It seems like the data is showing us that there's a good impact from this program already.
Yeah, so it's just been a little over a year since we're doing it. So, we're still looking at the data. There's not a lot of data right now, but I'm waiting for maybe 2 years out to really see how much it's increased. One of the things we collect is we ask the fire departments each year to give us their demographics of how many interior and exterior firefighters they have. And if we see that the numbers staying even, that's a win. That means they're either retaining or not losing members. But we're hoping to see the numbers go up. But either way, even if they don't dwindle, that's a positive. So We actually just brought on board two program specialists that are like data analysts. So we're going to have
Yeah.
them start really looking at the data. It's something new that we've never had in the office before. So, and I think that's going to be effective, looking at data across all of our branches, different data schemes, like our fatal fires in New York. We unfortunately we lead the nation in fatal fires, which is not where we want to be, number one. So we're doing a really big community risk reduction program too, and so that's, these are things that we're looking at. So we're definitely looking at numbers. Numbers are going to tell us a lot, and hopefully, I hope to add more courses to the stipend program in the future. But we just have to look at the data before we continue to do that.
Right. From your perspective, what are the most significant emerging risks facing New York's fire service today?
I mean, the recruitment and retention of the volunteer fire service. I mean, we had a meeting yesterday. We're tracking multiple fire departments that are either dissolving or just not operating because of lack of membership. So that's quite serious. We want to make sure the communities have effective fire protection across the state. So something we're starting to flag, pretty closely. So that's one. And two is just understanding that shorthanding firefighting is going to continue. It's just we don't have the staffing right now to do it, and how do we most effectively train the fire service to do that?
Do you foresee? Because one of the things that I've always found frustrating from my point, from the career side, is that sometimes the career fire service will say just hire people. And I think that's not responsible because we're not addressing some of the core issues that have happened before that. And I've always been a very smart person once told me that the first thing that he felt should happen is a paid administrator to help starting with taking some of the burden off of departments, and then going into if you need supplemental staffing and stuff like that. Has the state or anybody been thinking about how to have those conversations? Because I know that in some areas it's on the horizon, but what I don't want to see for the fire service is it done incorrectly. And I don't know what the correct way is, but I think I certainly like the idea of having the horse before the cart instead of the cart before the horse, so to speak, and having that administrator there to help start sorting through the issues versus now all of a sudden you got payroll, HR, like adding career staffing adds this whole other element, and so there's got to be a way that we, what I'm trying to say here,
Yeah.
is there something that anybody's thinking about when it comes to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because we don't really have jurisdiction to tell people how to handle their, run their firehouse, right? So,
Right.
And their agencies. So, it's hard. I mean, we meet with all the large fire service groups pretty regularly. We talk about these issues, but it's really up to each individual agency to determine what's best for them. Certainly. People have called us for advice. People have called us for, called the coordinator, and the coordinator's reached out to us, the county fire coordinator. So it's not an easy thing to answer, because what may work in one area of the state may not work in another area of the state. The state is so different across the state. And again, now that I'm here and I drive the state, it's a very large state, and certain areas and certain pockets are just so different than others, and how it would work. Some work really well now and they don't need change.
Yeah.
And then others are falling apart.
I almost and I know the EMS issue in New York State is also at the fire services involved in emergency medical services, and we're having this shortage. And one of the conversations I had with somebody is it's almost like we need a World War II-esque campaign of for the recruitment, because but selling what it is that we get out of being firefighters, because I think so many younger people are looking for purpose, and it always strikes me odd because I feel like the fire service has that to give to young people. like the fulfillment that they're looking for, the ability to make a difference, to help in the community. Like these are things that they deeply want to do, but we just have to get out there. And the same thing with EMS. Like there's a huge fulfillment of things that you do in the back of an ambulance in the pre-hospital setting, and like I just, instead of just asking people to join or help their community, like sometimes I really think that the ball that we've dropped as a fire service is not speaking to them directly and being like, hey, are you missing this part of your life? Like, do you want to make a difference? And like, do you want, and kind of coming up with a new language on that, I guess, is one of the things that it's sometimes these thoughts pinball around in my head, and sometimes the machine hits tilt finally and I stop thinking about it. But, it's always like that's been one of the things. I know we've done the Is There a Fire Inside You campaign, and that had successes with it, but I think like we need to go to the next step, because it's not just, I look at it as it's not just the volunteer fire service, it's the career fire service. When I look at our civil service test numbers, there's sort of, I almost knocked my chaos candle over. I look at our test numbers, and our numbers are going down, and we've always kind of, I feel, at least I don't actually have, I guess I can't, it's anecdotal because I don't have facts and figures to prove it, but like we've always got, our bench was the volunteer fire service. People volunteered, they wanted to become, get into the job. And now I look at the test, the people signing up for the, the Dutchess County exam versus when I signed up for it back in 2001, 2002 timeframe, and the numbers are not there. So like it's, both sides are having this recruitment and retention issue, and there's got to be a way that we both collaboratively look at it, because it's going to affect. I mean, there was an Albany area city, I remember, and their list was shockingly small. And
yeah, upstate New York, the career fire service is really hurting. Downstate, not as much, but upstate is really hurting, even for the career fire service.
Yeah. So anyway, sorry about the. Out there.
No, so I mean, we've worked with the Department of Education. There's a lot of BOCES programs that are picking up, like the BEFO course.
Oh, that's great.
So I think we have it's listed on our website. I think like 9 different BOCES programs. So like I would encourage you working with your local school to see if the BOCES program wants to do that. And we have staff that would work with you to do that, and that just gives them an interest, because listen, like the BOCES programs are great because those are the programs for the students that don't just like the regular education programs, and they have an interest in being a mechanic, being, in cosmetology, being in something else. And, we're not all fit from the same mold.
Right.
And, so, we are actively working with, ed on different BOCES programs, and that's been expanding. We joke, through our community risk reduction program, like everybody goes into a school, and what do you learn in school as a kid is stop, drop, and roll. Well, there's never been an epidemic of kids running around with their clothes on fire.
Right.
So what messages are we really sending by doing that? Is that effective? Or do we want to, we need to change the mindset and really look at what we're looking at. So, it just makes me laugh. Like, actually, Jim Cable's the one that actually said that in a meeting one day. He goes, "We don't have an epidemic of kids on fire." And I'm like, that's really true. But that's what we do. And we go and we teach them in the communities. I did that many, many times. And even growing up, I joke because, when I joined the fire service, I was a volunteer firefighter, and I took the police exam, the civil service police exam. Never once did I consider taking the fire exam as a volunteer firefighter, because I was a woman and I didn't think it was the right thing to do. But it was normal to see female cops. So, even that was like, why wouldn't I have taken the career fire service? I never thought about taking it. And it was just something that, to this day, I don't know why I had that mindset. But, unfortunately, that was probably just like, hey, you can't be a career firefighter, you're a woman. And, now I wish I had thought a bit differently back then, but so we need to change our mindset. We need to think of things differently. Go to areas where things are working. But we have to make it fun for them. The problem with I think this current generation, not that they don't want to learn or do stuff, is that their attention span is less. So having the same career for 20 years, they don't think of that as being a good thing. Like, they change jobs like it's crazy. Every 2 years they change jobs. But what they don't understand about the fire service is every day is different.
Right.
every call is different. So they can get that excitement of, and have that change of jobs. And I think that's how we have to sell it to them, is that it may be a 20 or 25-year career, but every day is going to be different.
I'd put that down. I think you're onto something there, Lucy, because that's, you look at the jobs they switch in there, and then I'll say in the normal career field, but like every day is different, and our calls, like there could be routine calls, but it's never all routine, and even the routine
Right.
ones have nuances about them that are different. So. That's a
Yeah,
great
or
point.
just the crew is different because somebody
Yeah.
mutuals out. Now you're working with different people that day. So there's certainly, ways that we can sell it to make it more attractive. We just have to be creative in how we do it.
I think we kind of answered this, but OFPC, are they preparing firefighters to meet evolving threats, whether it's technologically, environmental, or culturally? And I think we just kind of touched on that with the threat to the volunteer fire service, or the fire service in general, recruitment and retention. Is there anything else to add into that?
I mean, we're really trying to push community risk reduction. So we got a win this year with sprinklers, where the codes, we didn't get full sprinklers in 1 and 2 family homes, but we got it in townhouses where there's municipal water. So in 2026, that's a new code change, which we're happy about. So the community risk reduction affects both the firefighter and the resident and of the state, because if we can make homes safer, it's going to be safer for firefighters to do their job as well. So really trying to do more education with the Office of the Aging, and the data that we see for fatal fires is they're mostly seniors or young children. So we're trying to have staff go out and build coalitions to work with their local partners, Meals on Wheels, local senior centers, things like that, to do more public education, making sure they have working smoke detectors. I mean, a lot of the fatal fires that our folks investigate, the smoke detectors aren't working. As simple as that they could have been alerted. I look at my situation when I was a kid. Obviously, we didn't have working smoke detectors. The dog just woke my mother up, or else we all would have been dead in the house. So, we were fortunate, but that's stuff that we can make effective change. So that's not only good, like I said, for the communities, but it's good for the fire service for various reasons. The fire is still going to happen, but now they're not going to go to fatal fires. So that doesn't have the behavioral health effect on them. So it's cascading effects of just doing simple things like that.
Right, and plus, like I always look at community risk reduction as, there's like the fire side of it, but there's also, like you just talked about, Office of the Aging. There's, how many lift assists are we doing? Like what can we do to, like, all right, so we're running a high amount of lift assist. Is it, one location? Can we do education there and help them out? Is there an environment? I mean, I remember in Fairview we had a lift assist that was happening on a high frequency, and all it was the guys realized that the wheelchair was catching on the corner of the sidewalk as they were rolling in, and that was dumping the patient out onto the ground, and they needed to be lifted back up into the chair. So they went out and they bought pavers from Home Depot and used the circular saw to cut them in, and they fixed the problem by going out of their way and spending $10 out of their own pocket, and they put these pavers in, and it stopped that resident from having to dump out of their wheelchair every time because they couldn't navigate that one turn. Like.
That's exactly what it is.
And
Absolutely.
And that's where, like, yes, we do heroic things in our community, but man, we were really heroes to that person that day, because it was so embarrassing for them and everything else. And that's just like, there's so many aspects of community risk reduction that I think we don't sometimes in our own way sell it to our own people as the positives. So it's fantastic that we're doing it.
And, as we collect this data, it may affect, how we train the fire service too. Like we may find that, we always tell people when we're doing searches, check under the bed, check in closets, check in bathtubs, kids may be found there. But as we really dive into these fatal fires and do investigation into them and find that, no, that's not where we're finding kids. So it may change our search techniques. It may change where we go first in the residence, because maybe they're often found in a stairwell or in a back corner, or, so as we really dive into the data and we get into it a little bit more, we're gonna effectively change how we train the fire service to make it better for them too, and more effective, so that they have more positive search where they're going to go right to where the victim usually is. And then also, with our fire investigations, the more we could identify how the cause of the fire happened, then we can do more public education about, like we did with the Chromebook of, don't stick something metal in your Chromebook and light it on fire, to set the battery on fire. So, the more we can do to educate the public, the safer the public will be and the safer the fire service will be.
Yeah. What does the phrase frontline mindset mean to you personally as both a leader and a firefighter?
So I will say this. When I was fire chief in my fire department, I would be down picking up hose like with my firefighters. I would never do anything or have anybody do something that I wouldn't do myself. And I felt like it was important to have your firefighters see that you were willing to get dirty with them and be on the front lines with them. But at the end of the day, too, I would be the last one to leave a scene, the last one to leave the firehouse, because I would walk around after everybody was picking everything up and say thank you. So I think being in front of your people, being accessible to your people, and letting your people know that you're there for them and you're going to fight for them, but you're also, like I said earlier, going to hold them accountable. And if they know you're going to hold them accountable, they'll act accordingly. But at the end of the day, you have to be their boss, and you have to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that empathy goes a long way. If you know someone's having a bad day, and you just go up to them and say, "Hey, listen, I know that deadline's tomorrow, but it doesn't look like you're having a good day. Let's wait till Monday." That goes a long way for your folks.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Looking ahead, what would you like your legacy to be in shaping the fire service culture, safety, and resilience across New York State?
I mean, one of the most important things that I'm doing right now is this, mental wellness and behavioral health. If I can help affect change and letting firefighters know that it's okay to seek help, that would be one of the most honorable things that my legacy I would like to leave behind.
Well, we've been a little bit over an hour here, Luci. I appreciate you coming on Frontline Mindset. This has been fantastic. Is there anything that we left out that you would like to hit on before we wrap up the episode?
No, I don't think so. I just really appreciate you asking me to be on, and thank you. Yeah. It's been great.
Luci, where can people find you if they have any questions or if they want to reach out about anything we talked about today on the podcast?
I can share. You can share my email if you'd like. That's fine.
Okay.
And then, or just if you reach out to the main line of OFPC, 518-474-6746, and you can get me that way too.
Awesome. Luci, just hang on for a minute as we do the outro here. But I want to thank everybody here from the Frontline Mindset. Luci, thank you for coming on and talking about your path on the Frontline Mindset with us today. This has been fantastic. This is Rob. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Until then, be safe, and we'll see you guys out there.
National Fire Radio.